It's just one of those things where, get an opinion. If you feel off about what they're saying, get a second opinion and then see. And then if both are saying it, then that's probably accurate. But that's where, at the end of the day, it just always pays to contact your LO.
Welcome to the Real Pulse of Real Estate, where we discuss the true ins and outs of the housing market. Welcome back to Real Pulse of Real Estate with Adam Cron. I'm your host, and I am joined by David Beheimer of Guaranteed Rate. Hello, David.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, sir, today I want to go ahead and talk to the listeners, the rabid audience that we have, because we've gone viral by episode 4, I'm assuming.
I would hope so by now.
Is easily avoidable mistakes.
Yes.
Because, being in the business for a month, you can see some consistent, oh, okay, that's going to be a problem. Let alone being in the business for as long as we have, right? It just seems like there's almost a consistent misunderstanding with buyers of what not to do and what to do when it comes to real estate. So what are some let's nots?
So let's not. If we're talking in order to get pre-approved, I'd say one of the biggest one that, funny enough, has been coming out of the woodwork a lot lately is using your nickname or maybe your middle name instead of your legal name.
Yes.
So for instance, my legal name is Ronald David Beheimer. I go by David. My friends call me Dave.
Yep.
I would not apply for a mortgage under David Beheimer or Dave Beheimer. I would have to do Ronald D. Beheimer.
Got you.
You think pretty straightforward. I sign everything David Beheimer. I type everything David Beheimer. I almost forget that I have a first name half the time because I just don't ever use it except for when I'm filling out legal paperwork. So I can see how it's like an easy to be made mistake, but it's just one of those things where, it can cause problems on the pre-approval because just for one, if I pull your credit report and I see I'm pulling it on Dave Beheimer and it comes up as Ronald David Beheimer, well, now I have to call the credit company. I have to get their credit fixed. I have to find out with you, hey man, what is your actual legal name? Because you put this and it's not actually this. So funny enough, one of the biggest ones that I would say is something that's been coming out of the woodwork. Now, what I'll say as far as prior to buying a home, and this kind of goes, really a lot of the do's and don'ts really go between before the contract, getting pre-approved and after. But really the biggest thing I would say, we always say, don't buy a car, don't buy a boat, don't finance furniture, don't get your credit pulled.
Don't open a new credit card.
Exactly. And, I also want to kind of take a sidebar on that as well, because, people always hear this and I have people who've called me in panics because they're like, David, I'm moving out of state. I have to have a car. I don't have a car. I have to have one. How am I going to get to work?
Yeah.
And, it's one of those things where the reason why we say don't buy a car, don't get your credit pulled is because if your debt to income can't sustain that car payment, or let's say you're in a down payment assistance loan that requires a 620 credit score. Well, your mid score is a 621 and you get your credit pulled by somebody to get a piece of furniture and that hard inquiry drops you down to a 619, which is really, it's only 2 points.
Yeah.
It's not much, but that could be the difference of now you're no longer qualified for that down payment assistance. And if you don't have the money to cover the down payment that you are getting assisted on, now this all just goes into a tailspin downward. So that's really where we're coming from when we say, don't get new credit pulled. Don't buy the car. It's more or less just from a debt to income standpoint. So I always say, if you have any questions on anything that I'm saying now, or if my clients, if they ever have questions, I always just say, let me know before you do something. Don't call me leaving errands saying, hey, I just financed a dining room set. I say, call me on the way to errands so I can try to get this figured out to see if it works. And, obviously my whole thing is, if you don't have to do it, don't get it, please. Just make it easier on all of us. It'll make it easier on you. It makes it easier on us. But it's one of those things where if you're going to come in here and you have no means of transportation, there's no way, and you absolutely have to do this. It's not a want, it's a necessity. That's when I say, call me, talk to me, and I'll try to get it figured out to see if you can sustain a car payment.
One other thing to sort of understand with that is it's not just like credit cards, right? Yeah. It's understanding everyone thinks cash is king.
Yes.
And that's great. And it is. And yet at the end of the day, if you're buying furniture, because there have been times I've heard clients go like, oh, don't worry, I bought it in cash. Well, did you just take enough funds from buying this thing?
Yes.
That you're now potentially too low of what underwriting would consider because they don't want to deplete your bank account when you're buying. You're at a zero balance now buying a house.
Yeah.
Did you just use too much cash to where you can't afford the down payment? You are too close to where your funds would be depleted. Underwriting now won't approve you.
Yeah.
And understanding that, I think a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of memes on it and everything else, understanding of like, oh, I just used cash. Like it basically, it doesn't count.
Right.
No, it does.
Yeah.
It does, because at the end of the day, correct underwriting will consider if your bank account's going to be depleted, that's going to be a problem.
Oh yeah, no. And that's, I mean, no, that is a really great point as well, because yeah, I mean, it could be, maybe we have you needing to bring $5,000 to the table and that couch just put you at $4,950. And it's like, okay, maybe we could, because, you know, and it all is a case by case basis when it comes to credit, your income, stability, things like that, you know, an underwriter may let it slide. But, you know, if you need to bring 5,000 to the table and now you have 4,950 or 4,900 in the bank, well, now you don't have the funds to close, and an underwriter's not going to sign off on that saying, oh, hey, you got to bring this money to the table. And then you don't have it. Where's the money coming from? So yeah, that's where it comes from. You know, don't buy a car, couch, furniture, you know, anything like that, especially not on credit. But, you know, if you have questions on it, always reach out to your LO.
Yeah, I do think it's more so because every situation is unique. Yeah. It's just not assuming things will be fine. If it has to be the point of closing on the property and then ordering furniture, I completely understand. My wife and I ordered furniture in January. We just got our couch to sit on like a week ago.
Yeah.
We had to cancel our dining room table order and order a different dining room table because our table, when we ordered in January, said, oh, it's not going to be here till December. I get wanting to have things in place.
Yeah.
But if it means getting you into the house comfortably and then getting those things, that's the priority.
Absolutely. And like I said, you know, anything that I say on this podcast, you know, obviously if anybody has any listeners have questions, you know, obviously always feel free to reach out to me. Some of the things you wouldn't really think about is, you know, don't close your credit cards. Don't close your credit card accounts. Even if you just leave a zero balance on it, close it after the closing if you want to get rid of it. But
for those who might not understand why.
You think when you pay off a credit line or you close a credit line, you think it's a great thing because now I don't have this debt. I don't have a liability hanging over my head. But traditionally, and I'll put a disclaimer out there, I'm not a credit expert by any means, but from what, you know, I have seen based on what I've seen in credit reports, working with credit experts, things like that, is that typically when you close a credit line, your credit will actually take a small hit before it reverses and goes to better from, hey, you successfully paid off this auto loan. You successfully paid off this. Your credit will take a little bit of a hit before that. So again, it kind of just goes back to, you know, what if you're in that down payment assistance program and you were, you know, you're at a 621 and now you're at a 619 because you closed a credit card account because now you don't use it anymore. So that's one, it kind of all just goes back to anything that could negatively affect your credit score or your debt to income ratio. That's where most of the don'ts of buying a home and easily avoidable mistakes come in.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, even understanding when my wife and I were in the process of buying our house, understanding we installed a brand new patio and everything, and it's all great and we loved it. And we did not put in any patio furniture, and we didn't even think about buying patio furniture until after we closed.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, even if I felt like my funds were comfortable and we weren't going to deplete bank accounts or anything, I didn't even want to take that necessity of explaining where that money went.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So it's just being as cautious as possible. And honestly, being in somewhat of a sit tight and hold on moment for realistically 30 to 40 days, which is your loan process.
Absolutely. And that's the thing too, of why we even try to speed it up even more. And that's why like we try to crank out that, 21-day close guarantee. So it's like, if you can't not hold off on spending absorbent amounts of money or moving money around and doing just crazy stuff that like, I can't tell you the last time I've just decided to move $5,000-$10,000 out of my bank account for the time being. Like you really only do it when you have to. And it's like, okay, well, if you have to for the real estate transaction, we already have that covered. You're fine. Don't worry about it. But yeah, it just all comes down to make sure your assets stay the same or get better. Make sure your credit stays the same or gets better, or your income stays the same or gets better. If you get a raise at work, we can update your income, and then that could give you that extra little bit of a cushion where now. So there's always, that's why I always say, like, reach out to your LO if you ever have questions like that. One thing I will say is don't have friends or relatives. Don't have your mom or dad. I know they want to help you pay for the appraisal. don't have them pay for the appraisal, because when I see that the appraisal was paid by John Smith Sr. and I'm working with John Smith Jr., well, now we need a gift letter. Now we need, and then depending on the program you're in, we may need to see your donors' bank statements to show that they already had that money going into them.
Same with earnest money, right? So
Yes.
that I've had that issue where the client doesn't have a checkbook, because let's be real, we're in 2022.
Right.
And at the end of the day, a lot of my clients, the age they're at, they don't know how to write a check.
Yeah.
Or they don't have a checkbook, and that's totally fine. Yeah. And that's something that's a lot more common now than what it was.
Absolutely.
And yet the people who are writing checks, if it doesn't have their name on the check, that's another problem.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other thing too. And that's kind of, that can go into another thing I was going to say is don't change your name. If you just recently got married, hold off getting the name change done until after you close on the house, because you can't legally sign papers when I get your ID and we see your social or whatever that says that you are Mary Smith, and then now all of a sudden you're Mary Johnson. That throws everything off, because we've been doing this loan for Mary Smith. So it's that's one of the ones that people don't really think about. That, I mean, and it does come up because people get married and then they want to buy a house, and then oh, we just got back from the honeymoon and now we're going to close on the house. It's things that people don't think about like that.
One big thing with marriage, especially, is because it is, especially for our age, with me being 30 and you being younger than me.
I'm 27.
I know.
You're not a grandpa.
Must be
yet.
Nice, right? I filed for AARP the other day.
You can do that, actually.
Yeah, no, I did know. Yeah. However, they do disclaim that there are some benefits that you can't get because of your age.
That's fair.
So,
okay.
However, so fun little fact for our listeners. However, one big thing with people our age getting married and everything, one, receiving money funds, right? Instead of potentially getting gifts.
Yeah.
Money funds from the wedding, potentially using that for a down payment, because that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Having to explain where that money came from, those sort of things. Now, and I do want to caution of not scaring everyone. And David, you can always say, Adam, you're an idiot. That's why you're a real estate agent, not a loan officer. However, if let's say the name change thing does happen, it's still possible to get the loan closed.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a lot more of a headache.
Yes.
It's going to be a lot more signatures. There's going to be addendum stating, I, who was this name, am now this name, sort of thing. So realistically, again, what we're trying to provide is understanding these are do's and don'ts. And yet at the end of the day, don't cry if something necessity happens, or you started the name change process before you even thought about buying a house, and the perfect house came up.
Yeah.
And we're under contract. There are things to work with. And yet at the end of the day, if you can avoid it, let's absolutely avoid it, just to save the headache from you, because end of the day, goal is to make it as stress-free as possible for the buyer, because we already understand how big of a responsibility buying a home is.
Right.
Let's make it as easy as possible, and let's make it fun.
Well, and there's the other thing too, is that I feel like, there's not a lot of people that will break this down for people. They'll just tell you, don't buy a car. Don't get your credit pulled. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do this. And it's, if people don't understand the why, they think it's a make or break thing of, like you said, they do a name change. And then this person is just sitting there going through it thinking, I'm about to lose this house just because I got married. I had one of the happiest moments of my life.
Yep.
And now I can't buy a house because I got my name changed too soon. Mm-hmm. There are ways for us to work around it. It creates more hoops to jump through that just will create more stress. And at the end of the day, if we can make it less stressful, we will. And that's where I did want to say, it really does make a difference on, if you have a 20% back end debt to income ratio and you have to buy a car, more than likely, and you have an 800 credit score, more than likely you could probably buy that car. I wouldn't suggest it. I never suggest anybody to. The listeners are listening. I don't want them to take this as, oh, well, this loan officer in Kentucky told me I should just go on a shopping spree. No, I will always advise against that. But I'm just saying that, at the end of the day, always reach out to your LO. If it doesn't smell good or look good, that what they're telling you, ask more questions about it, or get a second opinion on it. Because at the end of the day, I remember when I first started as an LO, I was never really explained the whole debt to income of why, don't buy a car, don't buy this, don't do that. I didn't really get explained how the debt to income and credit, how that affects, and how, you can technically buy a car during a home process if it absolutely, has to happen. I was never explained that. So if somebody would have asked me, my first couple months into being in the business, I probably would have said, dude, no, don't buy a car that everything falls apart. Hey, this is it. And me as an LO, I'd be freaking out my client, making them think, oh my God, I just ruined everything. Yeah. And that's where an experienced LO comes into play, where it's like, you can do it. You shouldn't, but you can get away with it, and we can make it work. But it's just, like you said, it just creates those extra hoops. Buying a house is already inherently stressful. Why would you want to do anything else to make it more stressful?
Truly. And there's things of like how much research, how much like educating we do. Yes. We can come off negative at times. And I feel like we have this script that we tell our clients all the time of like, understand me saying these things is not trying to like upset you, make you negative. I am trying to prepare you so you're fully understanding of the situation.
Right.
And yet we want to be there to celebrate your wedding. We like, not like at your wedding. Like we don't need invites every single time. I
definitely want to be invited to my clients' weddings.
Every single one. But no, I am saying like we want to celebrate those moments. We want to celebrate those things. And one final thing that I do want to touch on is it's funny how so many things kind of just like pile on together like a domino effect. And I feel like a lot of times when people are buying homes, that means they're reassessing finances. Oh, yeah. Sometimes when they're reassessing finances, that means they're reassessing job, placement, place of employment, everything else. Let's talk. We're in the middle of a buying process. They get a job offer. Does that affect anything or?
So it absolutely can. So now let's say, it could be they're at the same company and they got a job offer of a promotion. That's fine. We can work with that. Where it really starts to come into play is, let's say I work in a bank. I'm a bank teller. I make $40,000 a year. Well, my buddy just started his own roofing company. He called me and says, dude, I'll hire you on. I'll pay you $60K a year to come be a roofer with me. Well, that's not only job changing, that is industry changing. And typically with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's guidelines is they want to see job stability. So if you change complete industries like that, typically they want to see about a 6-month stability of you working at that new job. Now, if you are working at, US Bank and then as a bank teller, and then you get a job making 45, 50K at Fifth Third doing the same thing, that's one of those things where, again, it creates those little extra hoops that we have to jump through now because you did change jobs, but it isn't necessarily a deal killer because at the end of the day, you are still in the same industry. You just got a better pay raise. So that's one way where it isn't a deal killer, but it can be if you go to a completely different industry, you're doing something completely different. Or if you take a pay cut because you hate your job, that could be a deal killer right there, even if it's in the same industry, because we pre-approved you, maxed out, everything's at this price point, but you just took a $10,000 pay cut because you hated your boss. You can't do that.
Yeah. And I fully understand making the change for mental health. Absolutely. And yet at the end of the day, if we're in the middle of a process of your numbers matter,
it's only 21 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Stick it through.
Let's get through it. And we've had clients like that where they are holding on and starting the job search after getting closed because they know they need that for their mental sanity and everything else. And that's completely fine. Let's get you through this process first and then better your employment, whether that be just a better area with better mental health or whatever it is, or better pay. Let's try to avoid, because like you said, accountant going from firm A to firm B is all right. That's approachable. Teacher going from teaching to full-on waitress or waiter.
Yeah.
That's a whole other story. It's the industry to industry change where if you're staying within your realm, we can probably make it work. Extra hoops, but probably make it work.
Right.
If we're going from out of your industry into a completely different industry, there's either going to be a delay or it's going to have a lot more creativity.
Well,
to it.
and again, there's always like the and then.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's, and then it could even be you are an accountant, but now you decide you want to go out on your own because you've been making all this money on the side that you're like, well, shoot, I have more than my full salary in side work. If I did this full time, I'd make even more at my job. Yep. I'm going to go 1099. I'm going to be my own boss.
Ooh, that's a scary thing to say.
Everything's done. Yep. Because at that point, like I said, we always have to go off of, and there are some ways that you can kind of work around it sometimes if, the situation is right and you can get certain exceptions. But for the general rule of thumb is that if you are a 1099 employee, if you're 100% commission,